I was not about to do this analysis because I feel like it's almost a project that we did in December, and to this week is an auction week because I'm busy. But at the same time, I understand we are in what you would call a culture shift when it comes to money matters, and if we do not continue with this pace, we can easily lose the momentum. So I appreciate Douglas for bringing these conversations online, however much he is for real estate and so much of the capital markets. Um, However, this is the kind of analysis that we see always in real estate that ends up not being reflected for those who end up investing in real estate. And now that we are putting in gear number two in the promotions of capital markets, you want to continue at the same pace. Now, I'm going to do this analysis for this particular building that Douglas has highlighted. And just to show you a few things, we're going to do the forward looking assessment as he has indicated. We're going to do what we call a look back assessment on the price movements. And because he has indicated a particular location that is attractive and it pays a higher price, then you'd want to think, is it worth it? These are a 16 units, one bedroom D units on 100 by 100, which means 25 decimals. Now, 25 decimals to have 16 units, it means that compound cannot so much accommodate more than 8 cars. So that means the class of people you're going to attract on here are going to be from that angle that they might not have cars, and that automatically means the value you have to incur on that is a little bit on the lower end. But let's continue on that. So to Douglas assessment, as you can see, he has indicated that the property right now is being sold for 2.4 billion. Yes, 2.4 billion here, which is important for me at that point. 2.4 billion, and he has assessed that there are 16 units. Each unit pays 1.4 million, or it's going to earn 1.4 million, and of which, if it's to earn 1.4 million per month, because this is a modern apartment, you'd expect it to pay tax. Let's use it at 12%, and then the other costs of running the building, rentals, and management, everything at also 10%. So and I'm going to use full occupancy, which means the full occupancy is going to be throughout the period, which means every single year the person who's going to rent, who's going to own this building would be earning around 268 million in revenue. However, what is flawed first in Douglas assessment, if we go back to this, is his assumption. I'll show it to you here. Is his assumption of a 10% increase in rent per year. It's impossible. There is no building whatsoever where you can do 10% increase per year. Now, we have seen a 10% increase where a landlord every 3 years without increasing rent, they put in a 10 to 15%. Or every 5 years where they have not increased the rent, they are now all of a sudden come and they add in a 20%. But a 10% increase every single year is impossible. No matter how much you price it and no matter how good your building is, especially if you have a recurring tenant. Now, to demonstrate that clearly for the people, especially in real estate that sell this hot air, is this. For you to have to say that in the future you can increase rent at 10%, as Douglas has literally recomputed, you are literally communicating the same that in the prior years you still had a 10% increase. Because if you are projecting something for the future, you should be in a position to look back and say, for the past 10, 15 years, rent has been increasing at 10% per year, every single year. You know, when I did the look back assessment here, you can see now we have to go 15 years back. at 10% here, as Douglas wants to allude to, and many real estate brokers want always to promote, it means a comparable apartment. Forget about how much it cost at that point. A comparable apartment, it means in 2011, that apartment was being rented for just 360,000, and every single year it has been increasing at 10% rental for the last 15 years, that now it pays 1.4 million per unit. Now, that assumption is completely flawed by two things. In such a location as Douglas wants to allude to, there is no apartment in 2011 that was paying 360,000, a one bedroom apartment that right now brings in 1.4. It's impossible. So if we are to literally say an apartment that was bringing in 368 in 20 um in 2011, 368 times 12 times 16, you know if we are to put it that way, that means that apartment right now, my estimate would be is is bringing in close to 800,000, which means an average growth of 5%. But even if we are to put it on 7%, that means in the one which was bringing in 300k, I can put it at 7%. That is right now would be bringing in close to a million. So it's relatively easy to assume that the growth rate is between 5 to 7%. Having established that, and this is the assessment which you need to pay attention to, having established that rent in Uganda, no matter the most prime location, grows on average between 5 to 10 to 7% every single year, then we come back and change this computation. You know, now all of a sudden we come back to a 5% growth per year, or what you would call a 15% every single 3 years. That means every single 3 years, the landlord adds in a 15% rental growth, which is relative, which means an apartment which is at 1.4 million right now, as they advertising it for, will be bringing in close to 2.7. And two, one, I'm being also highly generous to say 100% occupancy. If a place is highly sought after and you can increase rent at 10%, you should never have vacancy whatsoever. But if you are already factoring in vacancy rates, as Douglas was alluding to, it means that apartment is not prime. You cannot easily increase rent, otherwise your vacancy is going to come back to 50%. You know, but let's use 5% rental increase and a full occupancy. With these fixed incomes, it means every single year, the total income that someone is going to be making after everything, and assuming the costs are fixed in terms of tax, you pay 12%, and two, the repairs and everything, it means every single year you're going to be making 209 million. And it grows, as you can see, from 290 million. By in the 15th year you're making 415 million, and in the total 15 years you would have made 4.52 billion. Then you have to ask yourself, if I have 2.4 billion right now, what would that money do for me? If I'm to go now to the capital markets, now we are doing a full comparative of the capital markets, then you have to come back and be like, okay, so based on today's results of 17.5% in the 20-year bond, because you're investing for long term, someone who had a 2.4 billion would have got a bond which is worth 2.6 billion and above. Yes, because the interest rate has been that high, 2.6 billion, right? So, which means at 2.6 billion, you're going to be making a total income of, after before tax, of 403 million, and after tax of 363 million. Now, coming back to our assessment here, and to kind of show to Douglas, is that now I'm going to invest 2.6 billion. I'm going to invest 2.6 billion in the treasury bond, and I'm going to be making 400 million every single year. Take off the tax, it means my total net cash flow here, as highlighted in this color, is every single year is 363 million. While I'm making 363 million, for you are just making 200 million. The amount of money I make every single year from 2025 to 2040, for you start making it in 2035, 10 years later, with your rental incomes. Which then brings me to the most critical position when we are comparing these two. What Daga always also doesn't indicate for it, and we always talk about it in the treasury bond world, is the power of compounding. The same way you always talk about capital appreciation in your land, because as time passes by, two things happen about buildings. As the time passes by, the value of the land goes up, the value of the building goes down. But that's here and there. We can easily assess that. So we are saying, for me, with my 2.69 billion, because that's the bond I'm going to get right now, well, I'm going to just pay 2.4 billion. So it ends up meaning I'm going to be making my 363 million. Even if I come here and I say, okay, how much do you make in your real estate, that you say you make, this is the amount you make up before tax, you know, after tax and after every cost. Even if I come and I always withdraw this same money, such that we are on the same footing, and I put it here in the withdraw, you know, that means what have I done here? And let me explain this concept. You see, this is what we call a withdrawal of a coupon income from your bond. It means in the year it's going to pay you 363 million, but you only withdraw 200 million. Why have I withdrawn only 200 million? It's because the person in the land is what he's going to get also in cash. Now we are on equal footing. Everything else, I leave it there to grow. And I just keep on withdrawing equivalent equivalent of rental income. But that's all I have to withdraw, and we spend on. That means you get your rental income of 200 million, you spend on anything. I also just get enough of that to spend on that. That means we're on equal footing for me to have capital appreciation into the bond. And if I continue doing that, by 2029, my bond will be 6 billion. How much will your house be? Your apartments after 5 years, after 15 years, you cannot even necessarily bring up that apartment from 2.4 billion to above 4 billion, you know. And if we are to continue on the same path, you know, if we are to continue on the same path for the full 20 years, because this bond goes in 2020 up to 2023, you know, boom, then all of a sudden my bond is going to hit a 10 billion without any stress, without anything. What will your apartment be? Now, to kind of show to people that, and here I'm being generous, let me come back to real estate. I'm being generous on three things. One, the land is appreciating. Two, you are adding value of more than 5%, rental income of more than 5% every single year. And three, full occupancy. If any of those change, your bond, your income, your values do automatically change. Yet for me on real estate, on my treasury bond with my 15% locked in for 20 years, I'm going to be making that. And if by any means necessary, I keep reinvesting some of that money every single year, I'm moving away from 2.4 billion to 10 billion. Well, every single year withdrawing 200 million to spend it. Now, you tell me what advantage right now, and I say right now, real estate is a very good investment, but the pricings right now are making it terrible. Okay, not terrible, but they're making it uncompetitive for as compared to someone who ends up investing in capital markets. Now, this is an assessment of someone who has 2.4 billion. I don't even know anyone who has 2.4 billion will watch or even listen or read this. But at least it shows you the indication that you have to start off when you're doing the valuation of investments. Thank you so much, Alex Kakan.